Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, everybody. I'm hoping that everybody is here. No, we don't have a lot of people here yet. They're still joining. So welcome to this much awaited call. It seemed that first I did a post, which I thought was pretty innocent. It created a lot of comments and some controversy. So I had to do a live session with you guys. And then I saw some comments where people said, look at this woman who is some people said, look at this woman who's a Pakistani, has no clue about the West, and she's talking about the Western feminist model. She's criticizing the Western feminist model. And then some people, said, look at this woman, she's living in Dallas, she has no clue about Pakistan, and she's talking about how we should have feminism here in Pakistan. And I'm like, oh, wow. I guess nobody heard the entire talk. So first, let me just begin. If you haven't heard me before, my name is Eram Saeed. I was born and raised in Pakistan until the age of approximately 21. Then I moved to the United States, where I lived in Texas for 27 years. And the last almost 12 to 15 years of my life have been in the industry of self-development, spirituality, self-realization, human potential, which is a very, very big and rapidly growing industry in the West, luckily. And that's what my business has been. And, I'm an online entrepreneur. And I happen to host one of the world's largest telesummits on the subject of spirituality and energy healing. And I started the business myself from scratch in 2012. And I was bankrupt at that time. So I know a thing or two about women going from a victim to a victor, let's say.
Yes, but why were you, not only were you bankrupt, why were you bankrupt? That's what's important.
Because I was going through a divorce, and I was a single mom, and life as I knew it had turned upside down.
And your husband had sued you, right? So you had legal bills and all this stuff.
I had not one, but 4 lawsuits going on against me, including the divorce and including an abuse case. As you can tell, I'm still not very comfortable talking about my past, not because there's anything shameful about it, but because it just doesn't feel like me anymore. It's that Eram existed in that time, and this Eram is so different that it's kind of not difficult, but takes me a moment to kind of connect with that. Like, oh yeah, that's where I came from. That's what I was doing at that time.
Yeah, but that's so important. I'm Chris Attwood, by the way, for anyone who's wondering. And I think it's so important, Eram, that you share those things, because you're in a wonderful place these days, but it hasn't always been like that. And it's important for people to know that you've been through as harsh struggles as any woman would have to go through, and that not only was physically abused, but being driven into bankruptcy, and much to your credit, then winning those lawsuits, and taking custody of your children, starting your own business, and being massively successful at it. I mean, that's amazing,
And since you have worked with me, you know firsthand that it's not easy to create millions in this online space. A lot of people actually fail. A lot of businesses fail. And really, as you always point out to me, Chris, that you see God's hand in my life quite clearly, and I held on to that hand early on, and I have been holding on since then. And yes, I'm absolutely deeply grateful to God for the empowerment, for the gifts that He's given me. And of course, I'm passionate about the subject of women empowerment. And as I was saying to you guys, I moved to Pakistan, back to Pakistan. So I'm making a full circle now. Started from Pakistan, moved to the West, loved, got fascinated by a lot of the freedom and, whatever the benefits we have in the West, and then made a full circle back. I still appreciate the gifts that I got in the West. I lived in Texas. Part of me still considers Texas to be home because I lived there for 27 years, man. I mean, that was home to me. In a way, I did my growing up in America. I became an adult in America, and I definitely became this woman thanks to America and thanks to mentors like yourself, Chris. And again, from the inspiration that I got from Islam and um, from figures, Islamic figures like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Hazrat Khadija, his first wife, was my biggest inspiration. My biggest role model was her, and you know that I've talked about her often, because it tends. And so I moved to Pakistan last year. So for those of you that think I'm doing this sitting in Dallas and I have no idea about Pakistan, please correct yourselves on that, because even though I lived in America for 27 years, I came back to Pakistan almost every year, and sometimes several times a year. So I have stayed connected. I have family here. And of course, that's why I moved to Pakistan. I love Pakistan and I love my family here. And I want to say that I love the American people. I have a lot of wonderful friends in America, and they're amazing people. And okay, so I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes my internet goes out. So I want to start with first reading your bio, Chris, because you kind of just jumped in, which is awesome. So Chris Attwood, you guys, I introduced him the last time. He has been my mentor and a dear, dear friend now for many years. And here's a short bio. Chris Attwood is a leading figure in the transformational world and a master of creating enlightened alliances. He is co-author of 2 New York Times bestselling books, The Passion Test and Your Hidden Riches. With his business partner and ex-wife, Janet Gray Attwood, he built a global brand with over 3,500 passion test facilitators in more than 65 countries. Chris has created some of the major strategic alliances in the transformational industry, including his key role in arranging 70% of the interviews for the book and movie phenomenon, The Secret. A lot of you guys know about law of attraction and The Secret. I know it's becoming really big in Pakistan. So here's the guy who actually made that possible, or played a big role in making that possible. Chris is a founding member of the Transformational Leadership Council, also known as TLC, created by Jack Canfield. Over the past 30 years, Chris has been CEO or senior executive of more than a dozen companies. After resigning as president of a government securities dealer in the early 1980s, Chris took 10 years for his own inner development, spending 8 to 10 hours a day in deep meditation. And that is not an exaggeration, you guys. I have seen Chris meditate, and he does meditate quite deeply. And I think now you what?
How can you tell?
I can tell, man, I can tell. He still meditates very, very religiously, twice a day, every day at least. Mm-hmm. And this regular meditation practice has been a part of his daily routine for more than 45 years. So this is somebody that knows about self-development, who is comfortable in his own skin, who has been able to look deep inside his own inner self and come to terms with the shadows and all of the areas that are wounded, or whatever you want to call them, come to a resolution and healing so that he can form a very deep and meaningful bond with God. I want to tell you guys that Chris is not a Muslim, but he has deep respect for Islam, Quran, Prophet Muhammad, and we've had many amazing discussions. Chris actually has helped me in the past when I didn't quite understand some of the things, the concepts that I grew up with regarding Islam and Quran, especially about punishment. And maybe we'll have a talk about that on another day. Why does God punish? Why, if God loves us so much, why does he punish it? So concepts like those, actually, Chris helped me to understand while reading the
I,
Quran, which was
I have to
remarkable.
make one sentence about that, Eram.
Yes, please.
Because in my experience, God doesn't punish anyone.
No, he
All,
doesn't.
all God does is guide us. And if we
Yes,
don't listen,
absolutely.
that guidance gets kind of harsh sometimes if we're not paying attention, if we're not
Yeah.
listening to his guidance. But he never punishes us. He's just guiding us, always guiding us back to him, back to the fullness of who we really are, which is an aspect, a child of that magnificent infinite intelligence we call Allah or God.
Yeah. Thank you. So our topic today is why we shouldn't blindly follow the Western feminist model. Now, why am I talking about it? Because one of the things I shared with you guys in my post and in my talk last week was that one of the things that really alarmed me when I moved here and I started to observe what was going on, and I have been doing that actually for the last few years. I've been doing counseling and I've been doing my research. There are a few things that really are disheartening, which is one of them is, of course, I've talked about it, that we have strayed so far away from the social Islamic values, which we call in Urdu ikhlaqiyat. We have strayed so far away from that. We are focused on the ritualistic aspects of religion, which are great. They are meant to be there. They serve a very important purpose, but we have no idea about ikhlaqiyat, and so we're only stuck in kind of the outer expression of religion. By the way, we wouldn't be having this discussion today if we hadn't strayed so far away from the akhlaqiyat, because men would know what Allah expects of them and women would know what Allah expects of them. We would all know our rights and duties and we would be fine. But since that has shifted, something needs to be done. And one of the things that, of course, was very dear and near to my heart is women empowerment. But at the same time, the feminist model that has been propagated here in Pakistan is very alarming, because I come from the West. I have seen what has happened with the feminism or the liberal move, the sexual liberation movement of women in the West, and I've seen and I know what some of the effects are. So I'm gonna say a few things and then I'm gonna invite Chris to comment. Why did I invite Chris? Because hey, he's an American. Who better to talk about this stuff than an American? Why a man? Well, because as you will listen to him, you guys will realize that he's not just showing up here as a man, he is here as a teacher and as a student of human behavior, of human empowerment. And basically, he's also a great coach on relationships. He knows about the dynamics that create balance in a relationship and the dynamics that actually will destroy a relationship. So that's why. And then I have already scheduled a couple of other interviews with some American women as well that are very outspoken, very bold. One of them is Betsy Chassey, who is a producer, as you know, Chris, and she was the documentary producer of one of the most famous documentaries in the world called "What the Bleep Do We Know?" So she's a very outspoken woman, and guess what? On most of these points, she agrees with me. So she wants to talk about it too, the damage that the feminist movement has done in the West. Now, in all fairness, I talked about it in my last talk, that when the pendulum has swung to one side, where women's rights were usurped, they were oppressed, they didn't have rights, which was the case, 100, 200 years ago, that was the case, all over the world. Yeah. And so women were angry, they were full of rage, something needed to change. So of course, when you are wounded, when you're angry, you're acting from that place, you're gonna do two things. First of all, you're gonna react. If you are wounded, you just want to attack like a wounded animal. So the pendulum swung to the other side. And the second thing that you want to do naturally, makes sense logically, is that you want to look at the party that has aggrieved you and you want to say, first of all, I hate you. And second of all, I want what you have. So at that time, men were the perpetrators, right? That's what the feminist movement said. Okay, you guys are the bad guys, and we want what you have. So there was number one, man hating, and number two, they thought in order to have rights and in order to be successful, we want what men want. So we're going to emulate men, and we're going to become like men. And we talked about some of in my last talk, and we'll go over that today. Some of the drawbacks now, the cost that women are having to pay now because of that, is that, you know, women are more stressed out, they're more depressed than they have ever been before. They have equal opportunities now in pretty much everything. Women are able to get into any field for work, and that's, we know that in the West. So that should have made us happier. That should have made the women happier, but they're not. They're actually more stressed out. And there's a reason why, which we will get into. And in a nutshell, what I want to say is whenever you go against nature, you're going to lose, because nature is very powerful. And nature is God's will. They're aligned, right? This is how nature, when nature intended something to be in a certain way, that's, if you keep that in balance, that's when you're going to have happiness. Now, Muslims, a lot of the people in the West don't know this. Islam actually brought a framework for the empowerment of women 1400 years ago. And it's a beautiful framework, and it is in accordance with nature. That's the beauty of it. And you and I have talked about it. If you stay within that framework, that's where balance can be created. Now, what has also happened, I'm totally cognizant of the fact, is that what Prophet Muhammad brought as a message, peace be upon him, was, you know, it was then translated into the social conditions of the environment 1400 years ago. And then it's kind of slowly and gradually started to go back to where women were now oppressed. Some of the verses of the Quran, some of the teachings of Islam were deliberately misshapen. They were taken out of context. And now women kind of became a property again. She's a property of either her father, her husband, her brothers, her sons. They get to dictate how she's going to be, what she's going to think, how she can move around in society, what kind of clothes she can wear, even to the point how she should think and how she should not think. That is not what God intended. Then that's nowhere in the Quran, by the way. So I do agree that we need to have Pakistani women, especially because, of course, I'm living here in Pakistan and every culture is slightly different. So I'm talking about Pakistan for now, that Muslim women, Pakistani women need to get together. We do need to absolutely fight for women's rights, but we've got to do it in a way where we are conscious and we are wise. Wise people are not wounded people. Wounded people will act out of immaturity, like I mentioned earlier. They just want to attack because they're hurting, they're in pain. I honor the pain, I understand the pain, but two wrongs do not make a right. And what we want to think about is not just that I want these rights for myself. I have to think about my daughters and their daughters and the following generations. What is going to create balance? We're not going to get balance if we blame the men, if we fight with the men. We're not going to get any balance that way. So that's basically the crux of it. That's a very long introduction to our call. So before I start asking you questions or we start discussing different topics, do you have anything to add, Chris?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you for letting me participate in this really wonderful, fascinating discussion, Eram. And one of the things I would say is that feminism has, like everything, feminism in the West has gone through its own evolution. And so the best of feminism today, in my opinion, talks about the divine feminine. It's no longer, and it's again, the best of feminism in the West is no longer looking at that women and men should be equal in the sense that they should necessarily do the same things. They should have the opportunity. That's one piece. but there's a recognition that what makes women amazing and remarkable is the divinity within them, this connection to God, and their unique feminine qualities, you know, the uniqueness of being a woman, which is, I think, very special. And so in that discussion, there's a lot of, there's been a growth of understanding that both men and women contain both masculine and feminine qualities within us. And that most men, needless to say, the masculine is dominant in their experience and in their expressions. And most women, the feminine is dominant in their expression. Not all, but most. And by masculine, we mean those qualities of focus, of the masculine qualities are, what do I have to do to get things done? You know, step 1, step 2, step 3, it's logic, it's analysis, it's working with the mind. Masculine uses the mind to conquer the world, so to speak, to create success, to create achievement, to create results. The feminine, on the other hand, is about the level of feeling, that fine feeling level of life. And so the feminine generally is more intuitive. It's more sensitive to when things feel that they're off, when it feels like there's something that's not right. It feels like things need to go in a different direction. The feminine is more about process. The masculine is more about results. And obviously both of those things are important, right? You need both feminine and masculine. And as I said, both men have feminine as well as masculine, the ability to connect to those things. The women have masculine qualities as well as feminine. And one of the things that has come out of the whole feminist movement in the West is that women have been forced or have chosen to try and compete in a masculine world where they have to function from those masculine qualities. And what happens when a woman does that? A woman has to drop the feeling side of things and focus on getting things done, getting things accomplished, being analytical and logical and so forth. And what that ends up with is a 50% or higher divorce rate in the West, because a woman comes home, she's focused on what she's got to get done. She's got to get this done and this done. Okay, I got to get the kids together. I got to get some dinner. The husband he's tired. The husband comes home, he's tired. He's also in his masculine, but he just wants to, to be nurtured and to relax and to recover from sort of the assault of the day. And when both man and woman, when both husband and wife are in their masculine, if you've ever taken a magnet and put the same pole together, the positive pole and the positive pole, in this case, the masculine pole and the masculine pole, when the woman's in her masculine, the man's in her masculine, and they come together, they don't touch, they naturally repel each other. And the way that relationships are successful is when the man is in his masculine and the woman is in her feminine. Then it's like you have opposite poles, positive and negative. And then there's this strong pull of attraction that draws the two together. And so one of the outcomes of the feminist movement is when women have to work and they have to function in a masculine world all day long, and they haven't gained the ability to switch out of that into their feminine so that they can be a woman with their husband, then they end up like this with their husband, they don't connect.
No.
They never come together. And the other side of it, from the man's perspective, is that the feminist movement in the West has thrown the men's concept of themselves and what it means to be a good man completely upside down. I mean, it's thrown it into a tailspin. So men don't know if they're supposed to be compassionate, or they're supposed to, and nurturing, or they're supposed to be strong and directive and taking the lead. Sometimes women sometimes like it when the man is taking the lead, and sometimes they like it when they're compassionate, but the roles have gotten all mixed up. And so men
Yeah.
oftentimes are in this quandary of, how am I supposed to act? What constitutes being a good, strong husband and man these days, you know?
I totally agree. I talked about it in my last workshop that when I first moved to Texas, which was about 1994, and of course, Texas being a southern state, there was still chivalry. There were still men that would hold out the door for me if I was entering a pharmacy, for example, and they still held open a car door for you. Or if you were going to leave the table at a restaurant, they would get up. And a lot of that, it doesn't happen anymore, even in Texas, but in other states, forget it. Because I actually saw that happening, that if a man held open a door, the women with him would just be like, I can open my own door. You don't need to
Right.
open my door,
Right.
right? Because they were trying to show strength. So men didn't want to offend women. And so they stopped doing that. And you know, this thing I saw happening in the West at that time was this term misogynist was being thrown around, you know, like candy. You, oh, you did this, you misogynist. So and so, a misogynist. Same thing is now happening in Pakistan. If men question some of the liberal um, movement, you know, enthusiasts, they get labeled as misogynist. So most of them stay quiet, even when they actually want to help support and empower women. But they do, you know, this is not happening in a vacuum. This is the problem, which I see, by the way. So I'm going to dive straight into that. First of all,
I
somebody
just
had asked,
just for anyone who may be like me, who might be listening, when I first heard misogynist and misogyny thrown around a lot, particularly in the early Trump days, I had to go look it up, because what the heck is misogyny? You know, what is it, a
you should have
misogynist? So,
asked me. You should have asked me.
I know. So maybe you could
I'll sit down
define
with
it,
that.
just in case anybody doesn't know what it means. You could define it.
Misogyny is basically someone, I mean, I don't know what the actual dictionary meaning would be, but it's basically a man who believes women are not equal, you know, as human beings.
Yeah,
So that's how you
a
roughly
man who
define
is
it.
a man who treats a woman, treats women as inferior or
Poorly.
less than. Yeah.
Yes, as inferior. Yes. So as I was saying earlier, somebody had asked a great question, that could you please define clearly what toxic feminism is and what feminism actually is? Because I had said um, in my post that Muhammad, peace be upon him, our dear prophet, was the first feminist the world has ever seen. And some people took offense to that. Well, you can't call him a feminist. That is, I mean, go look up. And then I had to go look up the actual dictionary, you know, definition on Google, and everybody now looks at Wikipedia. And it basically means somebody who believes in women having rights and autonomy, and, you know, so on and so forth. Of course, people here take offense because they see these some of the, like I said, liberal enthusiasts that are basically pushing the Western model of feminism, which actually in the West, everybody knows that it is failing or has failed. They're pushing that model here and acting as if these Pakistani women live in America. And so they take offense that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not like that. But that's not what feminism is about. Feminism is about, you know, somebody who believes, like I said, in the autonomy, that women have autonomy over themselves, and they have a right to decide about their own life, about, you know, how they dress, how they show up. I had a huge problem with this slogan, and you know, I made a video about it early on, and I told you about it. Because I was familiar with this slogan, that it comes from the West, and it was my body, my choice. And they were using it here, and a lot of people, they translated it in Urdu, of course, Mera Jism Meri Marzi, and not knowing that this slogan was started primarily for abortion rights.
Right.
What happened? So that's part of the sexual liberation in the West. What happened with that has had the most dire consequences, where we now have very high teen pregnancies in the US, where either a young teenage girl has to give up school and college and any decent prospects for her future and has to take care of her child. She has to chase whoever the father of the child is, who is most likely another teenage boy. Or if she doesn't want to do that, then she usually gives up the child and the state raises the child. So you have more parentless children being raised by the state. And that's one of the most dire consequences. Of course, there are more. And what I had said was that this slogan, my body, my choice, actually, when you look at it, Mera Jism Meri Marzi, has actually a deeper connotation than the English version of it. It's like, the fact of the matter is that the body belongs to God, who gave you the body. And it's for women and it's for men. It applies to both sexes. You're supposed to live and use this body according to the guidelines that the divine gave you. And that actually, by the way, creates joy, balance, and happiness in your life as well. When you shift away from that, you actually create disruption and misery and all of those things in your life, such as what has happened now. We see one of the dire outcomes is that the family system in the US is breaking down. And it's because everybody thought, well, it's my body, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. And to hell with religion and to hell with what God wants. And, you know, it's what I want to do. So that was one of the things that I got deviated from the subject. Sorry. So toxic feminism versus feminism that is healthy and it's for the empowerment of women. So let's talk about that. So what does empowerment of women mean? So I'll tell you what it means for me. What it means for me is to basically shift the balance back the way God intended. In the Quran, God clearly says, men do not have, everybody's created equal, no race, no color, nobody has preference over another person or is superior to another person except by virtue of their character. All right, so we are equal, but our roles are not equal. I agree with that. There's a reason why I was born into this female body and you were born into this male body. Predominantly, my energies are going to be feminine, your energies are going to be masculine. And based on that, the way my body functions, the hormones that it produces and the hormones that it needs to stay in balance, for my nervous system to be normal, for me to be happy and balanced and not create disease in my body, I need to function in a certain way. And same thing applies to you. We don't create the same hormones. And if you actually start studying the human physiology in genders, and you get to the level of the, the endocrine system, which is the hormones and the psychological system, the nervous system and all of that, we could be two different species. Sometimes we're so different. The way we act, the way we think, the way we perceive, the way we process information, the way we process emotions, it's very, very different. So feminism is really about empowering the woman, but in the manner that is aligned with God's will. So one of those things is that recognizing the fact that a woman has autonomy in her life. Her husband, her father, her brother, or any other male member, once she's beyond the age of childhood, doesn't get to decide what she can and cannot do. Of course, there are certain things in which certain rules have to be followed, because this is not all happening in a vacuum, right? We are in a society, like for Pakistan, you have to recognize what the cultural norms are. If I decided, like you've seen me in America, I wear my Western clothes, and that's 99% of the times, that's what I wear in America. But I don't do that in Pakistan because I don't live in America right now. I live in Pakistan. So I'm cognizant of the fact, and my daughters don't either, by the way, even though they were born and raised in America, they're just more comfortable in Pakistani clothes because we're in a Pakistani environment. Even you wore shalwar kameez when you were here. So, so you have to recognize the fact that sometimes we need patience. We have to move, in steps. We take step one, we take step two, and we're looking at the end goal, but we're not doing it in a manner that is disruptive to the system. That's number one. Number two is that we don't blame the masculine gender. We don't make them the bad guy. I mean, frankly, let's be practical and honest here. Can we all become empowered women and push men out of this planet? Can we be happy without men? No, you can't. We need both to survive and to be happy. And a family needs both pillars, the husband and the wife. So the wisdom then is in understanding that the roles have to be correctly defined and followed, again, according to divine will. That is what I feel is the feminist movement that needs to be recognized in Pakistan, which is going back to the framework that Islam provided, and then understanding that and maybe having a panel that discusses how can we now implement this panel according to the century that we're living in today, right? That's what I feel women empowerment should be all about. And on that panel, I strongly believe we need to have women Muslim scholars as well, not just men, because in the past, all of this has been defined by men, well-meaning, well-intentioned men, but we need women. So that was sorry, your turn to comment.
I think it was great. It's just, from what you've told me, Eram, Muslim women have really beautiful models of what it means to be a feminist, to what it means to be an empowered woman. Maybe that's more accurate, to be an empowered woman. Khadija, you know, the Prophet's first wife. So from all that you've told me, I mean, this is a woman that owned multiple businesses, that was extremely wealthy, who supported her husband, who supported him in his mission and his vision, and became his first disciple. But she was a completely independent woman. And then you've told me also that one of his other wives, after Khadija had passed, one of his other wives was an Islamic scholar that was actually participated in,
Yes.
in defending the,
she was a warrior, she was a teacher, she was a scholar, and women had very prominent roles throughout the Prophet's life and afterwards. And one of the questions here was, why is it important for women to be financially independent in order to be empowered? And this is one of my passions. Is I don't believe that the Eastern woman especially can be empowered without being financially independent. Why? Because, as I said, the pendulum is on this side right now. It has swung to one extreme. They are oppressed. They are, whenever there is an unfair distribution of power. In this case, when a girl is born, she's totally dependent on her father, typically, and that's fine. When she gets married, now she's totally dependent on the husband. And the way that our culture has become now, unfortunately, even if she's getting horribly abused, she is told to make the marriage work because she has no independence. So she suffers and she suffers and she suffers, and the children see the abuse and they end up being either abused or they become abusive. So when there is such an unfair distribution of autonomy, then there will be an unfair use of power, abuse of power.
Well,
absolute power corrupts.
Can
absolutely.
I make a comment?
Please.
See, I think that's true in the context where husbands are not living aligned with natural law, not living aligned with divine will. Because,
and like I also said, Chris, yeah.
I just want to say that there's nothing wrong with a woman being dependent on her husband if her husband is honoring, respecting her, is giving her the freedom to do the things that she wants, to giving her the freedom, who is supporting her in pursuing the things that are her passions and her goals. I mean, you could say, and I'm speaking personally here, you could say my wife is totally dependent on me because I earn the income for our family, but she has no limits on what she can buy, on what she can do, on where she can go, on who she can see. There are no limits on her. She's a completely empowered.
She's a homemaker and she's an empowered woman. Yeah. Now, I did say that in the beginning that if Muslim men and women were following the guidelines, they were in alignment with God's law of what is the role of a Muslim husband and what is the role of a Muslim wife, we wouldn't even be having this discussion,
Right.
because we wouldn't have a problem. We
That's
have
right.
a problem because we have shifted away from that. And those roles do need to be redefined so people can understand what it's all about. And I really believe firmly that that's why people are mostly unhappy, even in Pakistan. There's a lot of stress and depression and anxiety. It's when people are not in alignment with how
That's right.
nature intended us to be. So yes, if you don't have those other issues, then yeah, she doesn't have to work. She doesn't have to be financially independent. But I will say here that um, Doe, your lovely wife, is German. So she is in a country where women,
Yeah,
by law, have a lot of rights. So,
that's right.
um, you know, those
But
women
I'm just
cannot
saying,
really.
to be honest with you, Eram, even if, and of course I'm making a leap here, but I believe that in our relationship, even if we were Muslims and living in Pakistan, it wouldn't be any different, frankly. Uh,
Well, I always tell you that you're a
but
Muslim,
that,
you just don't.
yeah, I know. And I feel honored.
You have all of those qualities. You have all of those qualities. You have integrity, you're fair, you're kind, you're gentle, and you're strong at the same time.
Yeah.
You're
So,
compassionate.
so thank you. I appreciate this. So, but my point here is that to answer the question that you were bringing up, financial independence for women is necessary when men are out of alignment with nature, out of alignment with God's will. When men are being oppressive, when they're being controlling, when they are dominating, when men are using their power to oppress women, then women absolutely have to be financially independent, because that financial independence then shifts the scale of power, so that they then have the
Yeah.
freedom to make their own choices and to pursue the things that they wish to pursue.
And I was talking about it earlier. I answered this person who had asked this question that, Islam never favored a woman to be completely financially independent on her husband, whether she chose to earn or not. At the time of marriage, the dowry, which is now the opposite, unfortunately, being practiced in Pakistan, is that the bride brings dowry. And that's not Islamic custom. Islamic custom is that the husband is supposed to present the dowry. And that is based on A, the husband's financial and social stature, and B, on the woman's social stature. Because, hey, if she is coming from a rich family, she's used to a life of comfort, and you happen to have fallen in love with her and you really must marry this woman, then you've got to provide some kind of financial security that when she gets married to you, she can call it her own. She's leaving her family, she's coming to your house. She should have that sense of security, so that this is my own, and it's supposed to be paid soon after the marriage. And unfortunately, that too is not practiced, because they think this is, by the way, I'm talking about meher. Meher is paid at the time of divorce. It's like, that's not what the practice was. Meher was paid immediately after the wedding, because now she can choose to invest that money somewhere. She can choose to put it in a savings account or whatever have you. And if she's been devoting her time as a wife, that investment could become something. And then when she does get inheritance from her father, from her family, which she has a right to, when she gets that, that is her separate property. The husband has no right to it. And if she does earn any income, and by the way, that is a choice that the husband and wife can make together. Whatever is best for the family, they make a choice that whether she should work or not. Because some women who are very skilled, very intelligent, they don't feel the satisfaction inside after, let's say, they have raised the children or whatever. They want to be able to contribute to the society. Why shouldn't she? God has given her certain gifts and she wants to share those gifts. Why shouldn't she? And in return, she's going to earn an income for it. That she has a right to do that. And the husband has no, I mean, this is a lot of my American friends, when they hear that, like, say what? I'm like, yeah, whatever she earns is her separate property. The husband has no right over it. She can do with it whatever she pleases. It's her separate property. So, and I was surprised, some men, and I think they were not Muslim men that raised this question. It's like, oh, that's so unfair. She's earning money, and why should the husband support her? Well, because that's a husband's role. That is the beauty of Islam, which a lot of these Pakistani liberals don't understand, that when the Quran says that the man has been given a slight preference, because Arabic is such a vast language, some people translate as men are caretakers of women. Some people say, oh, they have authority over women. Basically, what Islam is saying is that the man has been given a slight preference. And I talked about it in my last talk. That's because he is responsible for the well-being of the family, which means he's also responsible financially. And he's also responsible for each member to be like their rights are not being oppressed and all of that stuff as the head of the household. So he's been given the role of head of the household. So I want to talk to you about that. You are a Western man, and you and I have talked about it so many times. Like, okay, and you know me, Chris, to be this, I said in my last talk that whatever you can define as a strong, empowered woman, I've ticked all those boxes, been there, done that. And I did that in a country where I had no support because my family was in Pakistan. I had no support from anybody, let alone a man. I did it on my own with 2 kids. And with God's, grace, I made it into the top, whatever percentage that is in the US, top 5% or whatever. I made it there through my income. And everybody that knows me says, oh, you're this scary woman because you're so strong and you're this, you don't get scared. You're not, you're not scared of anything. I own all of that, thank you. And I still say that I don't care if it's a strong woman, empowered woman, or a homemaker, whoever that is. What a woman primarily requires from a man is a sense of security. She wants to feel safe. She wants to feel secure. Even women like me,
yeah. Well, and I have to say, you see me smiling so broadly, Eram, because there's no question that you're a strong woman. And I have also seen those vulnerable, those tender parts of Eram.
Delicate, the tender parts, yes.
And those are also beautiful parts. I mean, the thing is that it's what makes you such a beautiful example of an empowered woman is that you both have the strength and the wisdom to be able to create success in your life. But you also have the tenderness and the vulnerability and the sweetness that makes women such a special part of this creation,
Yeah. So we were talking about the fact that what I wanted to comment on was that a lot of, when I was a young woman, as a Muslim woman, I had a problem accepting that man is the head of the household, even though I grew up in a household where my dad was the head of the household. But of course I thought, well, I'm smarter, I'm this, I'm that. And of course now age and wisdom have taught me that that's ideal. So I want you to comment on that. Why is it ideal? Not in every circumstance, but in most circumstances, whether it's a Western society or an Eastern society? Or would you even agree that man being the head of the household? How does that work? How does it work in your household?
Yeah, well, our household is one thing. Let me first talk in general terms. And there may be people who disagree with me, and I honor that. But my experience is that, and I'm going to talk about men who are predominantly masculine in their experience and their expression, and women who are predominantly feminine. There are men who are predominantly feminine, and they're a different category, and there are women who are predominantly masculine, and that's a different category. But most men and women tend to have these masculine and feminine qualities. And men, both physiologically and psychologically, are built to protect. As men, we are built we have what I would call a coarser nervous system. We tend to be less sensitive. We tend to be less attuned to the fine levels of feeling that may be going on in a relationship or in a room with people. We tend to be less aware when people get their feelings hurt, or when, you know, things like that. We have a coarser kind of nervous system. That's all I can say. But the positive of that is that we can take a lot of abuse and come back. You know, this is the warrior quality of a man. We can be beat up. We can get beaten and hit and get attacked left and right, and yet we'll come back from it because we have that. The masculine by nature has that purpose to push through, to be able to make it through things. And so, from my perspective, and people are welcome to disagree, but from my perspective, the masculine is naturally in the position where the masculine role is to protect the family. The masculine role is to keep the family from being abused or being hurt or attacked in any way, but whether it's psychological or physical or monetarily or whatever way, you know. But the masculine has the role of keeping the family, because the children, particularly children, are tender. Children need to be protected. Children don't need to be exposed to all the vagaries, all the different things that are going on in the world. They need to have the opportunity to grow up and be able to maintain that beautiful state of innocence that we love in children for as long as possible, you know. Now, women,
Yeah.
on the other hand, if I could just speak to the second point, women, on the other hand, by nature, are not, you know, women can build up a resistance. You know, women can create a shell so that they don't get hurt so badly by attacks and by things coming at them. But I don't believe personally that it's natural for the feminine, forget about women, for the feminine to be in a position of being in battle, if you will, being that the woman's natural nature and the woman's responsibility, from my perspective, is to be sensitive to what's going on among the members of the family, to be able to feel if the relationship is going well or if something is off, and then help to bring the family back. That includes the man. The woman's job, or the feminine's job, is to bring the masculine back into the family and connect with the family, because sometimes the masculine will go off and do its own thing and forget about the family, because the masculine is primarily driven by mission and vision. You know, the masculine is primarily driven by having a purpose. I need to have a purpose. I have a reason for being, and I'm going to pursue that purpose. And that's what's dominant. And as long as the relationship feels fine, you know, from the masculine perspective, as long as everything's okay, I've got my relationship thing together, then I'm focused on my mission, on my purpose. The feminine, however, may also have a purpose, but the feminine is more dominated by the relationship, by the feeling level. And so if the relationship, if something, and my wife reminds me of this constantly, you know, I think everything's going along fine. She says, I don't think we're feeling very connected right now. I'd like to be more connected. Oh, okay. All right. Whatever you say, darling. You know, it's sort of like, so, you know, the feminine role is to be sensitive to those quiet dynamics of when the members of the family are feeling disconnected or connected, when the children need attention, when the family unit is being threatened in some way. And the other thing is that I believe, because the spiritual aspect of life is a very fine level of life. The spiritual aspect of life is at the depths of our awareness, the depths of our consciousness. And the woman is naturally more attuned to those levels. And so one of the responsibilities, from my perspective, that the woman has is to maintain the spiritual life of the family. And that includes bringing the masculine back into it when necessary. You know, now no woman can bring a man back if he doesn't want to be brought back. Okay, you know, I mean, if a man is off, if he's off in his thing, and a woman can try all she wants, and it's not going to have any effect. But in terms of roles, my personal feeling is that it's the primary role, not the only role, but the primary role of the woman or the feminine in the family to see that the spiritual life of the family is maintained. So.
Yeah, and that's beautifully explained. Thank you. So, so some of the posters were asking, well, this is not practiced and this is not the reality. Well, the truth is, that's what I keep saying. We have veered away from the model and the structure that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, brought. If you want to look at, if you really, what Chris and I are talking about, and you want to look at a practical example of what that looks like, well, look at Prophet Muhammad's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he lived 1400 years ago. If you, I mean, come on, if you're talking about oppression of women, oppression of human rights, I mean, the worst of circumstances. And he was born in that environment, and he even before he became a prophet, he had all of these qualities because that's who he was as a man. So we see him, we see this immense kindness, immense compassion, but at the same time, immense strength, integrity. So, and then how did I really encourage you guys to read the Hayat Tayyibah, read about especially his relationship with Hazrat Khadija and his relationship with Hazrat Aisha. I'm amazed at how beautiful both those relationships were. And one of them, of course, Hazrat Khadija was older than him. So she was the more mature, the wise, of course, and she also had both Hazrat Aisha and Khadija had a lot of integrity and piety in their characters. But Hazrat Khadija was the nurturing, the wise, right? And of course, a strong source of support for him.
But she also must have been a very powerful woman, a very, I mean, she
financially independent,
multiple businesses, right? Huh?
She did. She owned multiple businesses. She was financially independent. She was one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in Mecca at that time. So I what that takes, being an entrepreneur myself and being a businesswoman in America, which is still, it gives so many more rights to women today, but still, women are still in some ways oppressed there. To then think about this amazing lady that existed 1400 years ago, in which women weren't even really considered. I mean, forget about being equal to men or having any rights. They weren't even considered humans. Right. Wow, what an amazing, hats off. What an amazing lady she was. What strength of character, what resolve, all of that, what it took. And then you look at Hazrat Aisha, who was in temperament quite different from Hazrat Khadija, because she was much younger than the Holy Prophet. And she was kind of feisty. She had a childlike quality. So there was this innocence in her too. And yet she was very bright. She was very intelligent, had one of the most remarkable, almost a photographic memory. And so we see the way he was with her, like there's this one story, and I'm just going to tell it for you guys. This, for me, was an eye-opener. This was such a beautiful example of a relationship between husband and wife. And Aftab Uncle told me this story. It's in the books of Hadith. So one time there was some kind of a disagreement between the two, Prophet Muhammad and Hazrat Aisha. She was, he adored her because she was much younger, so he gave her a lot of leeway too. And everybody knew that he really deeply loved her. So there was some kind of a disagreement, and Prophet Muhammad's best friend was Hazrat Abu Bakr, who was the father of Hazrat Aisha. So, and he was the father, he was a devout follower, the most loyal companion of the Prophet. So they had a disagreement, and Hazrat Abu Bakr came to visit. And so Hazrat Aisha brought it to her father, and she said, well, we have a disagreement, and I want you to resolve it between us. And, now Hazrat Abu Bakr is looking at his dear friend, who is a prophet, and he deeply respects him, and he's just looking at him and going, uh-oh. And then, and God forgive any transgression, I'm of course paraphrasing from what I remember. And he said okay, and the Prophet just smiled, and Hazrat Aisha he said to Hazrat Aisha, why don't you tell him what's going on? So he gave her the first right, like, why don't you go ahead and tell him what's going on? And she said, no, I would like you to tell him. So she was still respectful. And she said, no, I would like you to tell him, but then make sure you only tell the truth. Right? Hazrat Abu Bakr got so upset. it's like, how dare you speak to the prophet like that? Because of course he is only remembering that he's a prophet. And of course she's talking about her husband.
Right.
And so she got scared of her dad. And what she does next is so beautiful. She goes and she hides behind Prophet Muhammad. And he just does like this and he puts her arm around her. That is so beautiful. So just, I don't know if they ever got a resolution or not, but that just showed how beautiful the relationship was. That is true strength. That is kindness. That is compassion. There was still respect between us. There was still love. And there was disagreement, even though he was the prophet and she was the prophet's wife. So,
Well, even in that story, you see the prophet functioned as the protector, and the
he
wife,
did.
and the wife in that situation functioned in terms of the feeling level of truth.
Yes.
Be
He was
sure to
feeling.
tell the truth. That's the feeling level. That they,
Yes.
and so it's a good example of what I was talking about.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful example. And so when we talk about what it should be, of course that's what I revert back to every time I see what the prophet said as far as the rights of women are concerned. It doesn't say, by the way, anywhere that a woman is only somebody, I saw this comment and of course it incensed me and I was like, oh my god, I have to remind myself to stay calm, and this is just this is, if I'm getting triggered, there must be still a wounded part inside of me, because somebody said, well, the only purpose a man um, seeks a woman is for pleasure or for children. And I'm here to tell you, my friend, you are sadly missing out on a lot of beautiful joy in life, because no, a man and a woman, a husband and a wife in a beautiful relationship are so much more than just that. So people say, well,
I have to say, in the story that you said of the prophet, can you really say that about the prophet? That all he was interested in his wives was children and
no,
pleasure?
of course not.
Come on.
No, they were his
And
companions.
but I think there's a point, Eram, that I hope you'll address here. It seems to me it was brought up by some of your viewers, is that what we're talking about sounds all well and good in the ideal, but what about the reality of the situation as it exists in most marriages in Pakistan right now? And how should women, from your perspective, how should women respond to a man who is oppressive, who is having affairs, who is lying, who is doing many things which are contrary to the Prophet's teaching, contrary to Islam, and yet he's the head of the household. He's the one in charge. What should they do? What does a woman do in that situation?
You put me on the spot. Thank you for doing that, Chris. Because of course, 90% of questions that I get these days are pertaining to that. And the old Eram, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, as you know, I volunteered for victims of domestic violence in Texas, in Dallas. The old Eram would have said, kick him to the curb, and you don't need to take abuse, you don't need to take this, and walk out. The reality is, like I said, I live in Pakistan. I see what the socioeconomic conditions are here. Sometimes
Right.
it is not possible for a woman to leave. And as much as I would like to open shelters and have them all over the country, I can't. They don't exist. And I also know that such a woman not only will face financial issues, she will face all kinds of cultural and social issues. She will be isolated, she will be ridiculed, she might even get killed. And you have to be cognizant of all of that, because like I said, this is not all happening in a vacuum. So now when somebody comes to me for that kind of an advice, what I do is I put them in my 30-day transformation course, and I say, well, take this course, because here's the thing: at the end of the day, no matter how hard and challenging life is, and it's different challenges for different people, how do you make it through? Is when you have a strong connection with yourself and with God. So going back to my example, okay, I got out of the marriage because I was abused and I was oppressed. Okay, I got out, but did my challenges end just because I ended the marriage? No, they didn't. Now I had a new set of challenges. And now I couldn't even blame anyone, because now it was just me. So So the only way I survived that was by having that strong connection with God and with myself, having faith in God, having faith in myself, creating the freedom, creating the independence, and and thereby implementing that in my life. So in short, what should a woman do? Well, she has to look at her situation. She has to look at her condition. That's why I put the women through my 30-day transformation course, because there's a piece at the end where I teach them financial independence too, because being an online entrepreneur, I love, helping people create online businesses and stuff. And I feel there's a huge potential for that for women in Pakistan. But I don't let anyone take that financial course until they have taken the 30-day transformation course, because until you create that inner resolve, that inner strength, that inner connection with God, until you understand what does God want from you? So far you've been living this life where my parents wanted this, and then my husband wanted this, and then I should do this for my children, and I think the culture wants this. What does God want from you? So they get to answer that question themselves. I don't answer it for them. They begin to form this very deep connection with God, and the answers magically begin to appear. It's like mind boggling to me to this day how life just begins to evolve and open up and change. And for some women, situations change so much that they are able to leave the abusive marriage. And some women actually don't leave the marriage, but the marriage changes.
Yeah.
In one of them, the husband actually transformed more than my student, and she didn't tell him anything because I was only coaching her. So it's like when you change, your life begins to change. When you transform, your life begins to transform. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping women and addressing this true feminism, this true model for women empowerment. It begins with a connection with God. And that was going to be my next question. How do you define, what are the characteristics of a strong, empowered woman?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer that question, but I want to first comment on what you're saying, because, for any woman who finds herself in an abusive relationship, where a marriage which seems untenable in any way, the advice you've given, Eram, I think is the most important and valuable advice that anyone can take. And that is that the disruption that appears out here in my relationship is an invitation from God, if you will, from Allah, to come within. It's an invitation to stop seeking the fulfillment from the husband or from the family or from the children, anything outside here, and seek the fulfillment from God, from Allah, from where it can actually come. Because you and I've talked about this before, that attachment is different than love. And attachment is actually the honoring of false gods.
Yes.
The attachment, when you're attached to your husband, when you're attached to your marriage, when you're attached to your family, you're attached to your children, you're attached to anything, then you are putting something above God. You're saying, this is so important to me, I can't afford to let go of it. And when you're in any kind of abusive relationship, this is the opportunity now to recognize that Allah is all powerful. God is all powerful. That everything that happens in your life is given to you or taken away by Allah, by God. And so to recognize that is to come to terms with reality. And as you said, Eram, many times when anyone, man or woman, when you come to terms with the omnipotence of Allah, of God, when you come to terms with the fact that everything in your life is being guided and directed by this divine force, then you open yourself up to surrender to that force. And with that surrender, then life begins to change in inexplicable, unexplainable ways. And you and I have both, we both have many, many, many students who we have seen this happen, is that when the student changes, their environment, their relationships change, their environment changes, situation changes. But it has to begin here inside, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
And
so the,
that sometimes you can be in an abusive relationship still and not be affected by it,
that's
because
right.
your source of strength and your source of happiness resides with Allah and not with the husband or not with the person giving you the pain. I mean, when we look at, I said this in my workshop, look at the importance of, you want to look at the importance of women, I'll just say one thing. The first Muslim, the first believer in Islam was a woman, Hazrat Khadija. The first Shaheed, the first martyr of Islam was also a woman, Hazrat Sumayyah. And so when, do you really think when Hazrat Sumayyah was taking all the beatings and the torture, she thought, oh, I'm going to do this for God and then God is going to save me and I'm going to have a wonderful life? No, she just knew the truth. So, it was in her body. This was at a sense of knowing that life was not worth living if she had to give up that truth. Yeah. So when you get to that level, that's why, by the way, so when you believe God to be such an important source, Allah to be such an important source in your life, and then you hear a slogan like Mera jism meri marzi, or my body, my choice, you're like, it's so offensive. It's not offensive because of who is saying it. It's offensive because it's a lie. It's not truth. It's a lie, you and it's true for a man and it's true for a woman. It's, yes. We are all made by God. We are going to go back to God. We belong to God. And we have to recognize that. And yes, sometimes he will transform somebody's life. Yeah. And another point I wanted to make, that it's in my book, as I mentioned to you, that I went through 3 main stages in my life. The first stage was the stage of oppression, and then came the stage of freedom, where I did everything to end the oppression I had suffered in my life, and I was going to attain freedom, financial freedom, independence, and I was going to live life according to my own will. And I realized that all the freedom that I had created, all the achievement I now had, was an attachment. It was now a false God, because I thought this freedom, this independence is my source of joy and the source of happiness and strength in my life. But in reality, it was always God. So now comes the stage of liberation, where you realize true liberation comes from being a slave to Allah, just saying, nothing is my will, nothing, only your will. And that is true liberation. So
and I just have to say that, and the compassion, Allah's compassion, is that when you live aligned with His will, then your life is filled up with joy. It is. Right? It's just filled up with joy. Yes. It's filled up with freedom. It's filled up with, all the things you want. Whether you have money or not becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, because it comes from inside. It's like, when you let go of the attachments, when you let go of this connect, like, oh, I need this, I want this, I need my husband to treat me better, I need him to love me, I need him to not have affairs with other women so I can feel happy. All of those needs are attachments. And when you suddenly just make Allah your main source of happiness and strength, then that source is from inside. And you could watch your husband having affairs or whatever he's doing, and you would just be, interesting. And you might still wish that he wouldn't do it, but it's not going to rob you of your joy. It's not going to rob you of your strength and your peace. And he may actually it's going to make him start wondering, what just happened to her? Who's this person? And that's actually happened to my students, where the husbands became so confused because she was no longer nagging. She was no longer saying anything, but she wasn't in a bad mood. She was actually in a great mood. She was grateful. She started seeing some of his good qualities, which she swore in the beginning of the course that he had none. And suddenly she started seeing some of the good qualities and some of the care he had shown, and she could appreciate that. And it was just mind-boggling for the guy, like, what just happened here? Yeah. So,
well, and the thing is,
but that's
we say that we love someone, right? And yet our love is dependent upon them acting or being in a particular way. This is not love, this is attachment.
Yes.
The true love is the love that most parents have for their children, I think. maybe not completely, but some parents have for their children at least, which is what's most important to me is my child's happiness. What's most important to me is their fulfillment. What's most important to me is that my
I would
child.
beg to differ with you here, Chris. Unfortunately, in our culture, in the Pakistani culture, one of the things that I've addressed, because a lot of people raised this issue, was that parents, and you're familiar with the Indian culture, it's pretty much the
Yeah,
same there. We have very high expectations of our children. They have to get certain grades, they have to
yeah,
be
yeah,
a
yeah.
certain way, and then we will love them. Otherwise, it's like
Okay,
we do
so
still love
so
them in our
so
heart,
it's a
but
bad example then, but
no, it's not a
but
bad example. It's how
but
it should be,
yeah, but
unfortunately.
real love is without conditions. God's love, Allah's love for us is without conditions. Allah loves us, whether we're having affairs, whether we're depressed and unhappy, whether we're on the top of the world. Allah doesn't care. God doesn't care what we do or how we do it. Now, will Allah give us guidance about what will bring us fulfillment and what will not? 100%. And if we are doing things which are which will bring us unhappiness and which are not aligned with His will, then we're going to suffer. Guess what? Because Allah is all powerful. But my point here is that in the name of love, husbands or wives get upset with each other because the other is not acting in the way that I want them to act. They're not behaving in the way that I want them to behave. And that is not love. That is attachment. It's attachment to my desires and how I want that person to be. Because if you think about it, and I don't know if anybody listening can get this, but if I'm married to someone and that person is having some affairs and I love that person with all my heart, then how could I feel anything but happiness for them, that they are having something that brings them joy, that they are having something that brings them fulfillment in some way? If I truly love that person, then what I want for them is their fulfillment. What I want for them is their joy, is their happiness. And if for some reason they need to, or they want to have that experience with someone else, then if I truly love them, how could I ever not want that for them? Except that
Yeah.
I'm attached, except that I have my own needs. It's not my love for them that makes me judge their affair or their desire to go outside somewhere. It's my attachment, my need for them to feel loved myself. That if they are having a relationship with someone else, then they must not love me. Okay? And if they don't love me, then my world
Yeah.
falls apart. This is not love. This is neediness. This is attachment.
This is not love. I agree. And I want to say something else here, but I know that a lot of people, maybe not watching live, but when they watch the recording, are going to have difficulty understanding what you said earlier, that Allah loves you whether you're a sinner or not, whether you're having affairs or not. It was one of those things that, as you recall, I had a very difficult time getting past, because I was raised with the notion that if you're good, then Allah loves you. If you commit sins, then Allah doesn't love you, and Allah is mad at you, and Allah punishes you. It was one of the most difficult things for me to get over, and I'm very grateful that Chris helped me with that. So if you guys are interested, we can do another talk on, because that's a completely different subject. And I tell you that I'm so grateful that I could get past that, because Quran doesn't say anywhere that, where has Quran said that I will only love you if you're perfect? He doesn't say that anywhere. The only perfect human beings, as we Muslims believe, are the prophets. Everybody else is liable and capable and do make mistakes. So where does
And
he say that I only
and
love?
I'm willing to bet that if you sat on the shoulder of any prophet throughout their life, there would be times when it appeared that that prophet made mistakes. It may be that they didn't make a mistake,
Well,
but it would
yeah, it
appear
is.
that
No,
they
no,
did.
no. Yeah, it appears that they did. Moses killed someone by
Yeah,
punching him. So yeah, it did
right.
happen. He didn't
Yeah,
mean to, but he did. So
right.
yeah, there are many such examples. But that's I just wanted to put it out there. If you guys would like to hear on that topic, please just make sure you comment, and then when I read them, if there's enough interest, then we'll do a talk on that as well. It was something really important I was going to talk about. Yeah. So I get a lot of questions. As you know, I feel passionately about the subject. Are you okay on time, Chris?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay. I'm very passionate on the subject of why Islam has allowed second marriage. And again, this was another concept, another, sticky point for me that I couldn't get over when I was younger. With age and wisdom, debatable, I know, maybe I got wisdom, maybe not, but with age and experience, when you get into the practicality of life and you see what's happening, in Pakistan, we have almost 5 to 8% of women that are, simply because women are more than men, and also because sometimes if they go past a certain age, or if they got engaged and then it got broken, or they got divorced, those women remain unmarried or widow. So we have more women than men that are single. It's a mathematical, logical thing that what are you going to do unless you're going to have a lot of deviation and a lot of extramarital affairs, and all of those things are going to happen.
Or a lot. I don't know if in the Muslim tradition you have nuns, but you have a lot of.
No, we don't have nuns. We don't have nuns. So Islam actually doesn't. Islam promotes marriage. Doesn't like anyone to be single. So anyway, so I had a couple of women, many women actually, that have approached me because they're in so much pain. And I understand the pain. I get it. It's the pain of betrayal. It's the pain of, looking at your future and it's been changed. And you thought of the future in a certain way and suddenly it's shown up in a different way. That's what the world is going through right now, thanks to Corona. But so the husband took on a second wife, whether it was right or wrong, let's forget about that. When they contact me, they just say, I'm in so much pain. And how do I go on? And one of the things they tell me is, when I ask them, okay, well, you do have a choice. Islam doesn't compel you to accept the second wife if you don't want to. You have the choice to leave the marriage. There's nothing wrong with that. And they usually say, I don't have a choice. I can't leave because I don't have a choice. And I always tell them, don't say that. That disempowers you. You do have a choice. You always have a choice. You would rather not exercise that choice. It seems so difficult for you that it's almost impossible. It seems impossible, but it's not impossible. So don't say I don't have a choice. Accept the fact that you do have a choice and you would rather not exercise that choice, because something dramatically shifts the moment she's able to recognize that. I said, when you say I don't have a choice, you're helpless. You're a victim of circumstances. Something has been done to you and now you must suffer. That's the only outcome you can see. But when you recognize the fact that I do have a choice, it's a choice I would rather not exercise, at least at the moment. Now we can talk about something. Okay, you're making a choice. Then let's talk about how to make this choice more livable for you, where you can deal with the pain, you can resolve with the pain. Is there some other mind shift that can happen that will cause the pain to lessen? And dramatically, by the time we're done with the session, the pain is gone, or it has shifted down so much that she can breathe and she can actually fathom some hope that, I have some hope that I can see some happiness in my future while maintaining this marriage. And so that's an empowered woman in my mind. That's Absolutely. An empowered woman, because she's no longer depending on her husband to be her only source of joy and happiness and strength. He is sharing that with another woman. She's going to be able to share the love, and it's not causing all this ruckus and chaos in her mind, because she's learned how to control her mind and which direction she's going to allow the thoughts to go. And who else is she going to allow to put thoughts into her head So she's taking control back in a very big way. And then in that moment, she begins to realize that this second marriage actually was a blessing, because she's now going to have more control and autonomy over herself than she did before when he didn't have a second wife, right? So God's love and blessings show up in a very different way. But when you are ready to submit, and when you are ready to basically, this is sabr, when you basically say, this is the most perfect thing that could have happened to me. Why? Because it's happening to me.
That's right.
Why? Because Allah, I believe, loves me more than anyone else on this planet. There's no love possible that can surpass Allah's love. So that being that loves me so much and is the most resourceful being, if there was any other situation that would have been better for me, he would have given it to me. So this must therefore be the best situation for me, and I have to find the blessing in that. Exactly. And suddenly it's a different woman. It's like, wow, I didn't see it that way. And I'm like, well, congratulations, sweetheart. You are an empowered woman. You have autonomy over yourself. And so when I say autonomy, that begins with your own mind, with what you are choosing to think, and therefore choosing to how you feel.
That's right.
Right? That's where it starts.
Well, and the way you started out that story, recognizing that in every moment we always have a choice. You know, the thought, I have no choice, makes me feel trapped. I feel like I'm trapped and I'm constrained. But once you recognize you have a choice, you may not want to take the choice to leave the marriage because you don't have any means of support, and it would be very difficult and it'd be very uncomfortable and all of that. But recognizing you have a choice, that in itself is being an empowered woman or man. But that's empowerment, is recognizing that I have a choice and that I'm making the choice. I am not a victim of my circumstances or situation.
You know, and I want to make a comment here. I was trying to find some questions. If you have any last minute questions, we're at the end of our session. Please send some questions now. And if I missed your question, I'm sorry. I'll have to go back and maybe invite Chris to come back again. A few of the men have been saying, when a woman goes to work in the marketplace, and I know I'm from this culture, I know when you say marketplace, you are using a very derogatory term. I didn't go to any market. I did when I was working in the lending industry and stuff. I was, working for different people and stuff like that. But I happen to be an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO of my own company, and I am a woman, as you can see. I employ mostly women. I employ mostly women who work for me. There's no marketplace. This is the internet. I literally need 24 hours whichever country I go to. I fire up my laptop and I'm back in business. And it's a business, by the way, that generates millions of dollars every year. And it's run mostly by women and some men, wonderful men like Chris. And most of our clients are women too. So where's the marketplace here? Stop using derogatory terms to basically define the work of women. And the women that work for me are from different countries. There are women from India. There are women from Malaysia, from the Philippines, from the US. Some of them are Muslims. A couple of them are not. And they're all very spiritual, wonderful women. And they're all, by the way, breadwinners for their families. And that's my passion. I always like to employ women whenever possible. So you need to stop using those kinds of terms, which you may not even be consciously aware of, because you consider that it's when a woman goes out to work, it's somehow disrespectful to the family. I understand that the way Pakistan is and the way, unfortunately, Pakistani men are, that's how they are with women. And by the way, I want to take this opportunity to say, all of you guys that send all kinds of weird messages to me, you are going to get banned. Everybody that sends that kind of a message gets banned anyway. It's remarkable that they don't even hear what I'm talking about, what I'm passionate about, what is it that I live for, what is it that I talk about, and they still send requests to chat with them and that kind of stupid stuff. So they get banned immediately. If you don't want that happening to you, don't send me those kinds of messages. And that, by the way, is also that's also a trait of an empowered woman. She knows how to set her boundaries.
Yeah.
She's kind, she's compassionate, but she also knows how to set boundaries. So yeah, on my platform, I will not tolerate disrespectful women. That's just, I've always said that. If you are abusive to women or you use derogatory terms, you will be banned from my page. You can do that somewhere else, but not on my page. That's my real estate. The thing that I wanted to say, did we cover all the points? Let me just quickly see if you have something to add, Chris.
I think you've done a good job of covering the topic.
Okay, cool. Men can't marry more than one because in that ayat, Allah clearly said he has to do, well, yes, he has to do justice and all of that applies, but we were just talking about the basic right, that does he have the right? It is encouraged. Please understand that. It is encouraged when the society has a situation where single women are in a larger percentage than men, then it is encouraged for men to take on multiple wives, okay? And I am speaking from experience because I actually counsel a lot of women that no longer have any interest in any kind of companionship with their husband, especially the intimacy part. They have no interest. And they tell me that I have put in my years. This is usually true for women 40s and beyond. And they say, I have put in my years, I have put in my time, as if they were doing prison work. I've put in my time. This is now my time to enjoy. And I have a status. I do, I go out with my friends. I want to have time with my family. I do all those things. I want to go to weddings and parties with my husband, and that's about the extent of it. I don't want to have anything more to do with him. And what is he to do then? What do you suggest? And whenever I ask them, they say, well, I've told him he can have affairs, but he better not marry anybody. And that's appalling to me, because he will be forced then to commit a sin, which is a grave sin in Islam. But please be wary of the fact that you are also responsible, because you are the one not giving permission or causing problems for that. So that's, again, a different topic. And that, by the way, is not an empowered woman. She could be, she could be educated, she could have a job, she could have all of those things, and she's financially independent, but she's not empowered if she's acting that way, because she's making her source of strength and happiness the stature that she enjoys in the society. And so she's willing to do or commit something that is a sin and kind of control her husband, keep him under control. That's not empowered. That's a bully. So thank you so much, Chris. It's been almost 90 minutes. This was awesome. I think that we may have to invite you back. Will you come back if we have more questions?
Yeah, of course. I love having conversations with you, Eram.
I know that you sleep early and you're sleepy because it's late in Germany. You go to bed early, so I can see that. It was fun talking with you. Always. Thank you so much. And my love to your lovely wife. Take care. And thank you all of you guys. Thank you for your comments. Bye-bye.